So I have owned the R6 for 2 months now. I wanted to do a quick video and share about some of the things I've changed since my initial review and since shooting my first wedding, now that I've shot multiple weddings and multiple portrait sessions. There are some things that I have changed, there are some things that I've learned, and there are a lot of questions that we repeatedly get asked, and I'm gonna answer those really quickly so you have a great kind of final resource and review of the R6. Hey there, I'm Katelyn. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is a place where we empower photographers to build profitable and purposeful businesses while also letting you into the behind the scenes of our everyday life. So I'm excited to talk about the R6 again. I know I've done several videos about the R6. This actually might be our last video for a while on the R6. I wanted to kind of recap and kind of tie everything up in a nice little bow, is because there are so many questions about it. It's such a new piece of equipment to enter into our industry. I would say that this is unlike any type of new camera body. So I wanted to quickly run through some of the most asked questions and also share a few things that have changed in my approach to shooting with the R6 since I did a video explaining what my settings were. So we get the question constantly, no matter how many times we point people to our long format video about the R5 versus the R6. Before they came out, we did a great video. Tyler gave a really in-depth explanation, but it's a long video and you have to really want to sit there and listen to all the technical details of it. So really quickly, for those of you who are constantly wondering why the R6 and why didn't you get the R5, here are some fast, quick reasons that will help you understand why we made the decision to use the R6 and not the R5. So the R5 has really expensive CF Express cards. I believe they're like $120, whereas what we're using right now for the R6, our SD cards are $19.95. Now there are upgraded versions of the SD card that we could be using for the R6. And we kind of weighed, should we spend about $1,000 and update all of our SD cards to this new format? And we decided not to, because another question we get is if we have any buffer issues. And the answer to that is no. If you are in KJ All Access, so KJ All Access is a membership program that we have for over 3,000 photographers. You can watch me photograph weddings and engagement sessions from behind the scenes. You can learn as if you are a third shooter, shooting alongside Michael and I. It's awesome. If you have watched KJ All Access, you know the way that I shoot is extremely fast. Probably a little too fast sometimes, but even with my speed of shooting, I've never had buffer issues with the R6 with the standard $19 SD cards. So for me, in my mind, I thought, well, gosh, I'm having great success with standard cheap SD cards. They're reliable. They're just not super expensive. I'm going to save myself over $1,000 simply not having to update CF cards for the R5. So another reason we chose the R6 over the R5 is huge file size. So the R5 has such high res files. They're so big that not only are you going to need to buy more of the expensive CF cards that they require, you would also have to have ample hard drive space. You'd have to have more time for uploading larger, massive photos that we honestly don't need. And so the large file size just was another deterrent to me. That didn't make me think oh yes, I want to have bigger file sizes. To me, I thought it's probably going to be more of a hindrance and it's not super necessary. The R5 is more expensive. It's $1,400 more expensive just for the body. Then you've got to pay for all the cards. So you're looking at well over $2,000 at a minimum to increase to this camera body, where, last point, the R5 and the R6 photography-wise are not that different, right? The megapixel size, the file size, yes, the type of cards they use, yes, those are different, but overall, there's not a massive, there's tiny little differences. There's not a massive difference though. A lot of people choosing the R5 over the R6 and have very strong opinions about that are videographers, because video is more heavily affected by the R5. And the R5 serves videographers better than the R6 in several different ways. Now, let me explain. We're actually filming this on the R6. And this is my R6, I think. Is this mine? This is my R6. We're filming this on the camera that I shoot weddings with. And it's doing great so far. If it overheats, we'll let you know. But so far, it's doing great. I don't really have, besides this one example, I don't really have reason to pick a camera body based on video capabilities and video qualities.
Hey guys, Editor Tyler here. Wanted to interrupt real quick and to just throw in 2 quick notes in the video section here. One is that Canon came out with a new firmware update yesterday that's supposed to address some of the overheating issues. When it comes to video, one of the biggest issues with the R6 and the R5 after they came out was overheating. And yes, these cameras can and will overheat more than is probably ideal. But with this new firmware update, what it will allow you to do is it allows the cameras to recover faster. With the previous update, it was making it really difficult for the camera to recover. It was taking a really, really long time. So although the overheating issues aren't great, it's definitely not as much of an issue. And the R6 has less overheating issues than the R5. So if you're thinking about getting this camera for video, maybe you're a photographer and you want to do video or something like that, this is still a fantastic option. As you can see from this whole video, it looks really great. It is an amazing, amazing video camera still, despite the overheating issues. But if you are just shooting normal YouTube stuff or the stuff that most people are going to be shooting, you're going to be fine. And then the second thing I wanted to mention was editing these files is pretty tough on your computer. It's using a new type of codec that requires more power from your computer to edit and to read, essentially, without getting too nitty-gritty into the details. So if you're getting this camera and you're hoping to shoot 4K and you maybe have a underpowered computer, this may give you some issues. I have a pretty beefy PC, as you can see, and I still had some issues, so I actually transcoded it into ProRes, which just is easier for your computer to handle. So I know how to do that, but if you're not super comfortable with video, just know that these 4K files may be tough if you have an older, slower machine. Again, you can always shoot in 1080p. It won't be a big problem. It'll still look really good in 1080p, but if you want to shoot in 4K, just know it's kind of tough on your system. That's all. Okay, back to the video.
Anyway, that's a little rundown of why we chose the R6 over the R5. We saved money, we got everything that we wanted, we don't care that we're missing out on some advanced video capabilities, and we're not spending money on CF cards. And I will just say this, something that I did not expect to be something that I loved about the R6 is that I actually love just shooting on SD cards now. It's simple, it's fast. I'm really loving that part of this major shift equipment-wise, and I never thought I would even care about that, but I really love it. So let's go into some random things, questions we got, thoughts I've had, settings I've changed. So several people have asked, whether it's Facebook or YouTube comments, about the worry that they cannot see their images in preview or in Finder just on their Mac. When you open up to see your card, once you plugged it in, you can't just like preview it in the normal way. And that is normal. So you can kind of have a workaround with that by using something called Photo Mechanic, which we highly recommend for culling. It's super fast, much faster. Even if people always say this, even if you let Smart Previews build in Lightroom and you let that kind of, it's going to take a while, especially for a wedding with like 5,000 photos, which I know that's a lot, but that's what I've been shooting for years and it works for me. It just takes so long. And so Photo Mechanic, it's just fast, it's instant. Culling is so much faster with Photo Mechanic. We'll try to link that below in case you've never tried it. So a lot of people are saying and have asked questions like, why are you not using eye tracking? Like that is the best part of this camera. You're missing out. Here's my thought. I would love to keep trying to see if I can fall in love with that feature. I did try it in a setting at a wedding day where I thought, okay, I can do servo and I can use eye tracking. I can, just have all these different amazing features, making sure that I am tracking this person coming down the aisle. Now, I did not use this for the bride. I was testing out for like bridesmaids, groomsmen, mother of the bride, grandparents, walking nice and slow. Still, it was a struggle. It was still delayed. It wasn't, I didn't feel like I was in control. And when you're a wedding photographer, I don't care how great a feature is. If I don't feel completely in control during a ceremony, I am not going to use a feature like that. And so maybe I will in the future. Maybe I'll get more comfortable. Maybe I'll realize some settings need to change. But for right now, I have 10 times more accurate in focus shots than I ever had with the Mark IV. And I am so happy. So eye tracking is great around the house with our kids. It's probably great at a family session with kids running around. Like that's awesome. But in my mind, because this camera is so fast, because touch and drag and AF points anywhere on the screen are so accurate, for me, I just don't find it necessary to use that feature, especially on a wedding day when I'm getting paid $10,000 to shoot a wedding and I don't really trust that setting and that feature, I'm not going to use it yet. Now, that's not to say that it's not amazing. It is amazing. I will agree. It is accurate most of the time. The one time that I tried it on a wedding day during a ceremony, it freaked me out. I almost missed a shot of a bridesmaid walking down the aisle, and I'm just not willing to risk it. So I'm going to keep practicing. Maybe I'll do a video in a couple months and I'll be like, hey guys, I've mastered it. But right now, I'm totally fine with mastering touch and drag, moving my AF point all around, getting used to that feature, but I'm not going to use eye tracking right now for moments on a wedding day that cannot be redone. It just was not consistent enough for me, but could be for other people. That's just my opinion. So let's talk really quickly about touch and drag. So a lot of questions about this, right? So some people have said, Katelyn, you don't need to use touch and drag because that's, using the viewfinder and holding your camera up to your face, that's a way of the past. Now you're going to be shooting holding your camera out. So maybe I will change this in the future. Maybe I will learn to love holding my camera out like this. Right now, I'm pregnant. Holding a camera out like this for 10 hours on a wedding day seems physically miserable on my shoulders, my arms, my back, and my neck. But also, this is what I found, when I tried to shoot like that at a session, it was a really glowy, beautiful maternity session. So the sun, is right behind the couple. As I move around them, like the lens flare is coming into the camera. So I'm trying to manage that and holding my camera out in front of me, trying to make sure everything's exposed properly, looking at the screen, looking at my settings, but also having the sun coming into my own face and actually hitting me in the eyes. That was actually really difficult. And I found myself thinking, you know what? I don't love this because there's something about looking through the viewfinder and using the padding around the viewfinder to really block the light and kind of, it almost like suctions my eye to the camera. That it's protecting me from all of the other light and all the elements that are actually happening. And it's helping me focus on what is actually happening through my lens. And so I find it a little bit distracting and hard to really grasp and focus on what I'm shooting when I'm holding my camera out and I have the sun hitting me in the face, so I'm squinting, but I'm also trying to make sure that everything looks great on the back of my screen. Another question we get all the time is about the megapixels of the R6. I have not run into an issue where I've thought to myself, there are not enough megapixels in these images. I quite often look at these images and blow them up, zoom them in Lightroom, and I think about if that was printed that big, we're talking life size, you would see some pixels. I'm not printing these life size though. And I don't think my clients are going to wrap a bus with their faces. If they are, then maybe, and that's something that's commonly happening in my business, I might need the R5. But for me, the R6 is totally fine. So question about RF lenses. We actually do own one. When we first got the R6, I was like, guys, I don't own any RF lenses. Never tried them. I'm using the adapter. Adapter works great. My lenses seem brand new. I love this. I don't need RF lenses. And I honestly, truthfully still stand behind that. I don't think we need them. I did not replace any of our lenses with an RF lens. I bought an RF lens that was completely unlike anything we'd ever owned before. It's the 28-70 2.0 lens. Michael got it to shoot at weddings because he uses the 24-70 2.8, or he has in the past. So having a 28-70 2.0, it's magical. And I will say this, it's fast, it is huge, but it is so sharp. And I find that this lens is so different than anything I've ever used before, but it's fun for me. We took it on a family vacation and it was so perfect. At the beach, I was shooting with high compression 2.0. And again, you got to pay for this. This is an expensive lens. So we kind of splurged, wanted to try the RF series, and get a lens that we've never experienced before, and we love this thing. So while it's big and it's heavy and it looks kind of weird actually sitting on the R6 body because it's so massive, we really love it. We're impressed. I'm not saying that I'm going to go out and buy the RF50 and the RF, like any of that series that I already own in the EF series. I don't think that's necessary right now. There's no reason for me to do that unless I needed a big, business expense. So I'm not going to do that right now, but I did want to share that after experiencing an RF lens and owning one myself, I can attest to the fact that there is something different about it, as there should be. It's faster, it's sharper. And when I say faster, I mean, it is just unbelievably fast, especially when you're photographing kids. So you just have to maybe rent it, maybe try it out, but you kind of have to see it to believe it. So wanted to mention that. This doesn't really affect much of anything. I did change my adapter ring dial to adjust Kelvin, and I've been training myself to use that pretty frequently. So that's a good little adjustment, a little setting tweak that is different than what I mentioned before. This is something that I wanted to point out that I have noticed. The last wedding that I photographed, we were in a huge rush with bridal details. And when you were shooting with R6, you can, lower your shutter and just immediately see like, oh yeah, that's the exposure I want, and click. And you don't hear a low shutter or a scary low shutter. You don't hear that the same way, obviously, than you did with the Mark IV. Normally, if my shutter's too low, I can just hear it in the way the shutter sounds, and I can say, oh, let me adjust that, increase my ISO, lower my aperture. I can find other ways to get more light in. But with R6, that's not as apparent. And so I got back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I shot that detail shot with a 100mm macro lens at 1/40th of a second without a tripod. What was I thinking? It wasn't super, there was a little bit of camera shake, but like no one would ever notice that except me. But when I got home, I realized like, oh, that's dangerous, because I didn't even realize, I couldn't hear that I was shooting at that low, and I was going off my viewfinder, wasn't paying attention to my settings. So there's a lot of things here. One, yes, it's something to be aware of. It can be scary, and it can be something that you're not aware of. You can be shooting portraits, under 200th of a second in low light, and all of a sudden get home, and you're like, oh my gosh, none of them were tack sharp. That's scary, right? You don't want that. So it's something to be very aware of, and it's something that I didn't even notice was a possibility until this recent wedding. And so now I'm paying attention to it more. But it's something that I feel like, as an educator and as someone who has proclaimed my love for the R6, I should be very honest about that has happened to me now twice in two different situations. And so I'm having to train myself to be more accountable and aware of how low I'm letting my shutter get, because I can't hear it the same way that I obviously could hear it with the Mark IV. So I hope that this was helpful. These were just some random questions we wanted to answer in a more like quick, concise format, but also there's some things that I wanted to mention about settings that I have changed so that we have kind of like an end of the R6 experience for now, to give you guys kind of like a final review now that I've been using it for 2 months, and it's not just a review right after I shot my first wedding. So love this camera, so impressed. It's given me, I'm 33 weeks pregnant with our fourth baby in 4 years. So it's not that I have lost passion for what I'm doing. I haven't lost passion, but this new camera was a welcomed, like, pick me up, like reinvigorating, I don't know. It just makes me more excited to shoot in the current physical state that I'm in. So I needed a little pick me up. I didn't expect this camera to be something that I love so much. But I really do love it. I'm happy with it. I'm thrilled with it. And I'm excited to take it out of my bag and to do a shoot with it, which I haven't really felt that in several years. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for tuning in. If you have questions or comments, we try to read all of our comments on YouTube and answer them as best we can. But make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss other videos in the future.